So now it's time to get to number 6 in our countdown of the top 9 greatest WWE promos, my favorite 9 WWE interviews of all time. And it is that time that Paul Heyman dropped his own pipe bomb on Vince McMahon on the November 15th, 2001 episode of Smackdown. This was in the middle of the Invasion. I have gone off on this Invasion so many times. I'm sure you've heard it ad nauseum. I'm not going to get into it again, but this was after WWE had bought WCW, and they did this great angle in July, because Paul Heyman had replaced Jerry Lawler on commentary earlier in the year. Lawler had left in protest. He quit because his wife, the cat, Stacey Carter, had been released. So Paul Heyman took his place. ECW was basically dead. And I liked the commentary team of JR and Heyman, because the tension there was real. So when JR would go off, and I even put a clip up that somebody ripped from, it might have been SummerSlam. These two guys were going at it, and then the clip just ends with, like, Ross, like, he can't take it anymore. Like, he has to just stop the discussion, and he just tells Heyman to, like, kiss his ass. Like, these two guys, they did a tremendous job of just tapping into all of the things that they hated about each other and just letting it play out on screen. It was great. In fact, JR says that one of his favorite partners to work with was Heyman. So Heyman was on commentary, and they did this great angle. I'll never forget it. July 9th. It was the July 9th. I'm almost positive that's the day. You can go back and check. If that was a Monday, then that was the day. July 9, 2001. That was the episode of Raw where it was Chris Jericho and Kane against Lance Storm. And it was Lance Storm and someone else representing WCW. And that was the night that Tommy Dreamer and Rob Van Dam ran in and made their WWE debuts. So they run in and they attack Jericho and Kane. All of a sudden, all these guys, these WWF guys, come running down from the back. Taz, Raven, the Dudley Boys. But you kind of notice, yes, they're WWF guys, but there's something a little weird about this, because everybody who ran down, Rhino may have been out there, they're also former ECW guys. So they get in the ring and there's a standoff. And Jericho and Kane are in the corner, and all of a sudden, all the WWF guys that used to be in ECW, they do a slow turn. And JR played this up great on commentary. He's like, what the hell is this? And all of a sudden, they all gang up on Jericho and Kane. And you realize, oh shit, now we've got an ECW invasion. So Paul Heyman gets up off commentary. He gets in the ring. That was that was maybe the best thing they ever did. The best angle they ever did as part of that invasion. That was in the middle of the show. And it left you so excited for, like, oh my God, this is awesome. You've got WCW guys. Now you've got ECW as their own, like, rogue renegade force. It's amazing how you can go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, because an hour later, they merged the two. They merged WCW and ECW, and Stephanie McMahon walked out as the new owner of ECW. Dead. It only took an hour to kill that great angle. So Heyman was kind of a mouthpiece for the Alliance. They ended up calling them the Alliance. And this was 6 days before Survivor Series. This was going to be the big winner-take-all match. It was Team WWF against the Alliance, and whoever won, you know, they would take over. They would take over Raw. They would take over SmackDown. WWF could die in that Survivor Series match on Sunday. You know, Heyman's out there, and he says WWF's going to die on Sunday, and don't blame me. I'm not the one who ruined everything that was accomplished by Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then you heard the clip at the top of the show, you know, have you watched the television show lately? Vince McMahon has lost his mind. The man doesn't have it anymore. He is a has-been. His ideas are antiquated. His concepts are draconian. And, you know, here we are now, 15 years later. And if Heyman walked out on TV tomorrow night and recited those exact same words, those lines word for word, ask yourself this. Would you disagree with him? Have things changed? Would you disagree with him if he came out and said the exact same thing tomorrow night? See, I think I know the answer already to the question, but ask yourself anyway. You could argue that, you know, the network was Vince's idea and he was ahead of the curve when it came to that. But in terms of like what you see on TV, in terms of the creative end of things, it's incredible. It's incredible to think that this was said 15 years ago and the same could be said today. Once Vince came out, because he was calling Vince out, and Vince came out, and Vince just stood there. He didn't say a word. and he allowed Paul Heyman to basically shoot all over him. It was so good. It was so good, and what made it so good, again, it's this whole work-shoot thing where you mix reality and storyline together. It's very effective. I mean, we saw it with the Bret Hart promo last week. That was number 7 on the countdown. We see it here again. Heyman's delivery was just pitch perfect, especially when he gets to the part about Vince stealing his ideas and his legacy, and he throws the hat at him, and just how animated he gets. You know, talking about how Vince put all the promoters out of business after his father died and stole Heyman's ideas and branded it Attitude. The reality is, what you saw on WWF television in the late 90s was absolutely the product of ECW. The tables, the blood, the hardcore division, all that stuff. Where do you think it came from? It was a toned down, more mainstream version of ECW. You know, it was ECW without the extreme violence with the barbed wire and the cursing and the music that they had no rights to use, which somehow they got away with. And yeah, the few episodes of ECW that I've gone back and tried to watch that I didn't watch back then, but they have all the ECW shows on the network. People have said, like, it's not the same. It's not the same because they've edited out all the music and it's just not the same. Now me, if I were to go back and watch them all, it may not matter as much to me because I don't have that same context. I watch so infrequently that maybe it wouldn't matter to me. But I guess it is a shame that they can't air those episodes in their original form, because I guess it probably takes away from it in some way. But that's what WWF was in the late 90s. It was a stripped down, more mainstream, acceptable version of ECW. The ECW influence, you could even say that to an extent WCW borrowed as well, but more so WWF. They absolutely borrowed ideas from ECW. I love the part where he said that Vince made wrestling a dirty word. You made wrestling a dirty word, Vince. Wrestling was already a dirty word. Vince just, you know, he doesn't like that whole old school wrestling. He said as much when he did the interview with Steve Austin. Steve Austin just kept saying wrestling over and over again. Had to keep correcting himself. And Vince is like, that's what my father did. It's like, no, you moron, that's what you do. You can call it whatever you want to. At the end of the day, it's still wrestling. You've got a ring, right? You've got a ring. You've got people that go in the ring and wrestle. It's wrestling. Let's just call it what it is. His comments about Taz, I actually thought this was really funny. I laughed when he called Taz a fat little obnoxious color commentator, and not even a good one. So, of course, we all know how the story goes. Team WWF won, and the following Monday on Raw, Heyman was fired, and Jerry Lawler came back to the company and took his seat back at the booth next to JR. And we didn't see Heyman again until April. Right after WrestleMania 18, he disappeared until after WrestleMania, and when he reappeared, he had someone with him, and that someone was Brock Lesnar. And so the Brock Lesnar era began. We are still in the Brock Lesnar era today. Heyman and Lesnar are still together today.